Welcome to She Said Homestead, the podcast that explores homesteading from a range of perspectives. We're Sage and Mickayla, two homesteaders, each with unique experiences, properties, and future goals for our homesteads. We're discussing various homesteading topics, sharing our personal experiences as women working full-time who are managing homesteads as well, and shining a light on the stories of other inspiring homesteaders.
Before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy our podcast, please consider leaving a review. It really helps us grow and share these homesteading stories with even more people. Hey guys, welcome back to She Said Homestead. Today we are talking all about Sage and her backstory. But first, I am Mickayla from Calico Acres.
And I'm Sage from Teranova Acres, and we both have homesteads in Western North Carolina.
Sage, why don't you tell me about your week?
I've been still just kind of laying low. That's what I do at the beginning of the year. I try being the operative word, rest. But I did start a handful of seeds this week. What else did I do? I went to the DMV this morning to get plates for my car. So this is the first time in the 2 years that I've lived here that I will have North Carolina plates. Severely overdue. And yeah, I mean, we had some storms. The weather was seriously cold for a few days. And then today it was like 56 before the sunset and I was walking around in shorts. So there you go.
The weather here has been pretty much the same. We only had our laundry room pipes freeze, but everything else was good for the most part. The birds were a little chilly out there, but they made it through.
Yeah, I was really surprised that my well didn't freeze. I set up a little space heater in it just in case, but then I was walking through the pasture and I realized that the extension cord that I had set up had come unplugged. And of course, you know, I've had the well freeze on me before at -5 and it was almost that cold again. So I was surprised that I didn't have any issues, but grateful, don't get me wrong. What about you? How was your week?
It's been an interesting week. I feel like I say that every week, but we have had some issues with our hens and the roosters. A little too much action going on, I think. So we have one chicken in the basement right now. She's free ranging while Taylor does construction. So again, if you hear that, everyone listening, I apologize, but this is the time we have to work on projects during the day, and that's when they're getting worked on. So
and that's the reality of homesteading, that there's just always projects going on in the background.
Yeah, every single time I've said this to you guys, the last few episodes, it's been a different project that he's been working on. So a lot going on here, but Marmalade, the chicken, she was very, very severely pecked and her skin was kind of just like really raw and gross. So we have her bandaged up in the basement and we're trying to keep her safe from the roosters and everyone pecking at her until she's healed. We have a couple more out there that are kind of getting pecked at, but they're not too bad. So we're just keeping an eye on them. And then we got a bunch of mulch delivered for free, which was really cool. Over Christmas, I don't know if we talked about this on the podcast at all, but over Christmas, we had tree trimmers across the street from us, and we went over, I made Taylor run over because I was baking cookies. I was like, go over there and ask them to give us the mulch. And so he ran over there, but our neighbors had already asked. So they got that mulch, but Taylor got their number and they swapped numbers, and he just showed up at our door yesterday and he's like, hey, you guys wanted mulch, right? And I'm like, yes, please, dump it wherever you can dump it. Like, leave it wherever. And they gave us a load of wood that we can cut up for firewood too. So I'm about to mulch the heck out of some pathways in my garden. I am so excited. And then I started seeds. That's the gist of my week, I would say.
Nice. Very, very calm, or relatively calm January, just kind of trucking along, keeping things moving. I'm glad that they remembered you and came back to your door, though. Didn't you trade them some eggs for that mulch?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were just standing out there and I was like, or Taylor was talking to the guy, and while his coworker or whatever was dumping the mulch, and I was like, hey, do you want some eggs? And he's like, sure. I was like, I have some for you.
Like, I have 100 dozen in my fridge. You're welcome to some.
So I loaded up 18 eggs and I gave them to him because I have like the 18 packs from the store that we used to buy. So he got some eggs. I don't know if he wanted them, but he got them. I am going to be starting more seeds and cold stratifying tonight. So we're well into the seed starting now, finally. I feel like it's taken me way too long to actually start them this year, but we're doing it and it's getting done.
It's still January. What are you talking about? You're late.
Well, I was supposed to start them like the second week of January, and I've put it off for 2 or 3 weeks now. So we're getting there.
I think you're right on track. I don't think you're late. I think you're good.
It's mostly the onions and the cold stratifying. I wanted to get that started like the second weekend of January, which was like the 7th or something. So we're a little late on it, but they'll still be. That's why I start them early, because I know I'm gonna have to push things back, so my calendar starts early.
If you plan to start it earlier than early, then you'll still start it early, even if you're late starting it early.
Exactly. So yeah, I'm probably just gonna cold stratify things for like 2 or 3 weeks, I think, in the fridge, but I need to make some space in my fridge, because even though they're like plastic bags, they're like 6 inches wide of plastic bags because there's so many of them.
Homestead problem.
Yeah. All right, are you ready to talk about you?
I think so.
You ready to do the sage tell-all?
Ooh, I don't know what you guys are in for.
All right, first I have a few, and by a few I mean like 8 rapid-fire questions. Okay, so the first one, I'm going to start off with the same question you asked me first, because I want to know, and I feel like it's a fun, easy one. So what is your favorite color?
It's a pretty solid tie between green and blue.
You're not going to elaborate more like I did?
No, I'm going to respect the foundations of the rapid fire questions with short, abbreviated answers.
I can't do that. I'm long-winded always. Okay, next question. Sweet, sour, or savory?
This is tough. This is probably sweet.
Really? You don't strike me as a sweet. This sounds weird. You don't strike me as a sweet person.
It depends. It's so hard. Depends. Basically, the way I translated that question was, would I rather eat chocolate, which is typically my sweet thing, which isn't super sweet. If food is too sweet, I can't do it. Savory makes me like bread, and then sour, I don't even know. I don't really eat much sour stuff. So really, the way that translated in my head was, would you rather eat chocolate or bread? So it's like chocolate. That's what happened.
Okay, well, the next question might be the hardest one that I have for you, or it might be the easiest. Who knows? Are you ready?
I think so.
What kind of bread is your favorite kind of bread? Out of all
focaccia.
Of them. Okay. See, I was like, either you're going to be stumped by this for like 20 minutes, or you're going to know your answer.
No, focaccia 100%. That's my go-to bread recipe. It's good for everything.
Now that you have your own podcast, are you becoming a podcast person?
No.
So,
I've tried to become a podcast person. I've looked for podcast content, especially related to gardening or homesteading, and I can't find anything I like. I am thoroughly bored by the topics that people discuss. So honestly,
so your favorite podcast?
Well, I could do it better.
So our podcast is your favorite then, you'd say?
It is. Honestly, it is.
Good. That's probably a good thing. What do you listen to, like, while you do stuff? Do you listen to music or audiobooks or a show?
It depends. Sometimes I will put on a show in the background. It's usually like, well, they took The Office and Friends off of Netflix. So that's what it used to be. And then now I guess I default to like Bob's Burgers, which for some reason is my next favorite. Or it's music. It kind of depends on the vibe.
Nice. I love it. I was just curious, like, do you just film whatever you do so you you don't listen to anything, or because I always have something on in the background.
Oh, I mean, that's like when I'm sitting down working for like my 9-to-5 job. But if I'm like gardening or anything else, I definitely have music on. Music is for sure the go-to.
What has been your favorite year of life so far? You don't have to elaborate why. You can just say whatever year.
I think they're getting progressively better. So I would say 2023 was the best so far. Hopefully 2024 is better.
That's good. It's on an upward slope.
Fingers crossed.
If you could live in any other era of time besides now, what era would you choose?
Nope. As a woman, I'm good with now. Now seems
Now?
like
Or
seems
future?
like the solid. Yeah. You never know. You never know what the future holds. I'm good with the evil that I know.
Alrighty. Would you buy your exact property again if given the chance?
Yes.
What is a dream you have that you've yet to achieve?
There's so many. When you say dream,
Goal,
I guess
dream.
what are the parameters around that? Because that's so broad.
What's something that you want to accomplish that you haven't yet in life? It's like a big goal or something. Something fun.
That is not a rapid fire question. That is a substantial question. Okay, what's something that I want to accomplish that I have yet to accomplish? I feel like I could give some cop-out answers, but they're not honest.
We're being honest
Like
in this episode.
The cop-out answers would be, like grow whatever 50 to 75% of my food in a year.
Yeah.
But I feel like the real answer is to really genuinely get like a better handle on how I like my internal voice and how I treat myself, and actually like be able to implement all of these things that it's easy to say I should be kinder to myself. It's harder to actually like remove the hypercritical inner voice. And honestly, that's where I'm at. Like if I can accomplish that in life, if I can stop being hypercritical of myself and just like freaking love myself,
that's a good answer.
I don't care about anything else. If I accomplish that, I've lived a good life.
There you go. That's a really good answer. I like that it's not homestead related. It's like personal. For what thing on your homestead are you the most grateful? Or about your homestead?
Oh my God, that's a hard question.
I had to do some deep ones.
I mean, that's tricky because yes, you can split it up into pieces, but it is like its own kind of entity is the wrong word, but it's the best word I can put to it. Like it's so cool to me how the land kind of evolves with you. Like as you put work into it, like you really see it change, and it does have a life of its own. And it's so cool. Like for example, that area in the back of my pasture where it was overgrown with all kinds of shrubs because it was clear cut before. The forest was kind of coming back, but it didn't have a huge diversity in the tree species. And so I went in there and I cleared it. And just the difference in the land and like how it makes it look, and the experience when you're standing in the pasture and looking over the mountains, if you can see them, like, I don't know, maybe that's not what you were looking for, but like it's so cool that like it's not just you doing stuff to the land. It's like living.
Yeah,
it's its own thing, and that's so cool to me, and that makes me really, really happy.
I feel like I have that experience very often on our property too, where I'm just like, wow, this is so freaking cool. It's you're grateful for like the experience of like literally growing with your property, like changing with your property.
Yeah.
Those were some good answers.
I'm glad I passed the test.
A+. This one was the question that stumped me the most last time. Who are you?
So my name is Sage. I'm a homesteader, and I share my experiences on multiple different social media platforms. I'm a gardener, I'm a baker, I'm a general DIYer. I would call myself a jack of all trades, more or less. I also work as an environmental consultant, and I have an educational background in both hydrogeology and soil science.
Where are you located?
I am just outside of Asheville, sort of in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains.
How long have you been homesteading?
I moved here in February of 2022, so I've physically been on this property for almost exactly 2 years now. And I considered myself to be a homesteader once I got here and started, making changes to this property. So I would say that I've been homesteading for 2 years now, and I got started pretty immediately once once I moved with gardens and chickens.
Do you feel like you've been there for 2 years already?
In some ways, it feels like I've been here for 5, and in other ways, it feels like I've been here for like 4 months.
So does it feel like home to you there? Like, do you feel at home there?
It definitely feels like home, yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and describe your homestead setup for us?
So I have 3 acres. It's a pretty rural setting. I live in a very tiny town, and about an acre of the land that I do have is pasture. About half an acre or so is gardens, and then the rest is wooded. So my house is small. It's less than 1,000 square feet. It's exactly what I need, nothing more. And there are also a few other various structures on the property. I have a small hay barn, I have a storage shed, and I have a run-in shed for livestock. That's where the sheep are sleeping right now. I think that's it.
I feel like the size of your homestead is really good for a one-person deal. Like, I feel like if it was any bigger, it might be a struggle.
Yeah, I frequently have that thought of like, man, it would be so cool to have more land. And then I'm like, how on earth could I manage more than I'm doing right now? Like, I think I'm good.
I also think that like the slope of your property probably adds some issues in there. If it was flatter, it
Most definitely.
Easier. I feel like if it was a flat piece of property, you'd be able to manage some more of it. But
I think that's a very accurate assessment. Yeah.
All right. What kind of animals do you raise there?
So I currently have laying hens, turkeys, and sheep. I don't have any meat birds right now, but I do usually raise a couple batches in the summer. And I'm also in between beehives right now, but I should get more bees in April. And then I'll also hopefully be getting some ram lambs this spring so that I can start breeding my sheep.
Taylor already said that he wants to come feed them.
Knew it! Oh my gosh. Bottle feeding a lamb is like the cutest experience ever.
Are you going to get any more or different type of animals in the future on that property, do you think?
In terms of different kinds of animals, I really can't think of anything else that I would want to add, but I would eventually like to expand to have multiple beehives, and I don't know if I'll be keeping any offspring from my sheep. That's also potential, but in terms of new animals, I think I'm set for a while.
I know you have a really big garden. What does it look like?
I have 2 different gardens. I have a food garden and a flower garden. The flower garden's brand new, so I haven't planted that out yet before, or I have kind of, but it was very small. It's much more expanded this year. So the food garden is up in the pasture. That one is about a 1/4 acre, and that's what used to be the horse paddock before I moved here. So it was the worst soil on my entire property. And it's so much better now that there's been a couple years of broad forking, composting, and mulching. The soil, you could barely get a shovel in it before. It was brutal to plant in. And then there's the flower garden, which is basically my front yard. That one, I am doing a series of no-dig beds and a couple raised beds. That's a project I've been working on this winter, so we'll see how that goes in the spring.
When are you getting a greenhouse?
When am I getting a greenhouse? Ooh. When I can afford a greenhouse is when I'll get a greenhouse.
Valid. Very valid. What is your general philosophy when it comes to homesteading, and is there any one in particular who's influenced you?
So my goal with homesteading is to raise the happiest animals and plants that I can manage with minimal disturbance to the land and also without synthetic inputs. So I like to rotate all my animals through the pasture instead of leaving them stationary in one place so that I can both improve the health of the pasture area with those organic inputs from the animals and also keep parasite pressures lower for the animals. So all of the animal shelters that I have are mobile, except I do keep the sheep in the run-in shed, which was here when I moved in. I didn't build that in the winter. And I also do feed organic, which is expensive, but it's worth it to me. As for gardening, I would like to graduate from just no-till to totally no-dig. I think this year I'll only need to broad fork my root veggie areas and I'll leave the rest alone. Broad forking was necessary at first because I could barely get a shovel into the soil in my food garden area. But I very much believe that no-dig has a lot of benefits for the microbiome that we can't necessarily see and actively gauge with our eyes. So I think cultivating a healthy microbiome leads to much healthier plants, and that's why I'm really eager to really dedicate or try to dedicate it to no-till. It's not all about the NPK ratios of fertilizer. It's also about cultivating a healthy space for the microscopic creatures that play roles that we don't even entirely understand yet. So I don't spray any pesticides or herbicides, even the organic ones. I rely on row covers, companion planting, and healthy soil to protect my plants. I also don't apply synthetic fertilizers. I rely on compost, animal waste, wood ash, and mulch to feed my plants. There are so many people out there doing so many wonderful and similar things, but Charles Dowding has been a big educator for me and a big influence on my gardening style. Bloomin' Gray is another great gardener, and she's been expanding into some really interesting management practices, like measuring Brix levels in her plants as pest control. Greg Judy is also an interesting source, mostly for sheep. And I do share a lot of the general philosophies with him, but I diverge on some things, partially just because I'm operating at a much smaller scale than he is.
Follow-up questions to that. Do you have a specific pattern at the moment that you rotate your birds and your sheep? I guess not at the moment, but like in general. Are you ever going to try and like rotate them behind each other so that their parasite issues are taken care of in general?
Definitely. Yeah, so I generally run the sheep first because they get the first pick of the grass that was touched last. So the freshest grass, because obviously that's what they eat, and so if there's chicken poop all over it, not great. So the sheep go first, and then the chickens go behind them. Soon. I don't have like a particular day marker that I try to hit, like 3 days or something, because it's not quite the same as rotating chickens behind, for example, cows, where they're picking through the cow patties and eating the larva. It's just a little bit different and not as time sensitive when you have sheep and chickens versus cows and chickens. So sheep go first for sure, and then chickens go behind that, and I don't have another animal that follows the chickens. But that's just the general structure I try to work with.
So do you do that when you have the meat chickens too? Do you do you not like care whether it's the layers or the meat chickens that would get rotated behind them, or would you do them in like sheep, layers, meat chickens, like a specific order?
So the sheep get a much larger area per move.
Okay.
They get a much larger, I'll call it paddock, than the chickens do. So if I have both layers and meat birds, I will, I can move both of them behind where the sheep were, but still in their own separate designated areas.
Gotcha.
When the meat birds get really big, like in their last week or two of life, I kind of just relegate them to the very back of the pasture because I have to move them every day. So it does kind of mess that up, but that's usually at a time of year when the grass is growing really fast, and I'm not as worried about, the grass growing back by the time that I get the sheep on it next. I don't really have enough property to keep the sheep off of the grass for 30 days when I also have meat chickens, which would be the goal for, good parasite management the ideal scenario would even be 60 days. I definitely don't have enough land for that. So it does kind of, I'll call it, mess stuff up when I do have all those animals, but there's a general system. It's evolving as I learn and as I get more practice at it. We'll say that.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll keep changing, like, as you get more sheep, too. Like, however that's all going to work. And then my other question was, do you currently, or do you plan to, like, inoculate any of your soil with, is it like mycorrhiza and like mushroom type things? I'm just curious, because I know that, like, that's really popular right now. So I just want to know your take on that.
For cultivating mushrooms or for pasture health?
Either.
I do plan to do mushroom logs. I don't have any currently that are producing. As far as additions to the pasture, really all I'm looking at right now is spreading wood ash to try to get the pH down. And I always tell myself that I'm going to make compost tea and spray it on the pasture, and then I get busy with my 1,000 other projects and it doesn't happen. But maybe one of these days I'll get my stuff together enough to do that.
I'm kind of thinking that maybe next year, like, or I guess this year, like towards the end of the season, I might do like a comfrey tea with whatever's left in the garden and just like let it sit and be stinky over winter, and then it's all set up for next year. Because I had the same issue. That would be cool. Good intentions that I never get to. To what extent did you grow up in this lifestyle and practicing these skills?
Basically, not at all. I grew up in the suburbs. I definitely didn't grow up around farm animals. My concept of a garden was a landscaped front yard. My grandparents did garden. They grew some of their own food, but I was never particularly involved or interested when I was a kid. I have always enjoyed being in the kitchen, though. Granted, I am more of a baker than I am a cook, and my mom was a really good cook, so I didn't really have to learn those skills until I moved out for college. So I grew up eating really good from scratch food most of the time, and my cooking is definitely heavily influenced by the flavors that my mom used in her food. So I cook with a lot of onion, a lot of garlic, and chicken breast. I have yet to meet a savory dish that has not been improved by those flavors. I'm not a professional chef by any means, very much a home cook, but I do consider myself a decent cook nowadays. Kind of funny that I knew how to make baguettes before I knew how to cook chicken, but that's just how it went.
Garlic is life, to be completely honest.
Garlic is life.
I will eat garlic in any way, shape, or form, any time of day. Okay.
That's one crop that I'm pretty sure I could actually never grow enough of, because no matter how much I grow, I can always find something to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, even giving it away. Speaking of garlic, that's what I said was my favorite thing to grow in the last episode about me. So what is your favorite thing to grow?
You know, it's always changing, and it's usually some variety that I haven't tried yet, but dahlias are consistently on the top of that list. It's not food, but it is my favorite flower, and that would probably be my favorite thing to grow.
That's fun. I love dahlias. They're so pretty. Don't they just make you happy?
They make me so happy. And they're hard to find at the store. It's not like you can just go to the grocery store and pick up a bouquet of dahlias. And me being the weirdo that I am, I think just the rarity of the access might be part of why I enjoy it so much.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely a farmer's market flower, but I don't think I've ever seen it at a store. Not that I buy flowers from the store at all, ever, but I don't think I've ever seen it at like a Walmart or I guess Ingles or something like that around here, Publix. Is there a story behind the name Teranova Acres?
Yes, there is. So, like I said earlier, my homestead philosophy largely revolves around the idea of regenerative systems. I want this place to be as healthy and resilient as possible, which usually means returning to systems that were broken down by human intervention and our attempts to over-engineer systems that weren't even really broken to begin with, in my opinion. Terranova is Latin for New Earth, which links to my desire to give this land sort of a new life by respecting more of the natural order of things. And there's also a ginkgo leaf in my logo, which is the oldest surviving tree species and acts sort of as an homage to the history of it all. So altogether, it references this poetic full circle of what's old is new and what's new is old.
I know this is going to be a kind of intense one, so tell us your backstory about why and how you decided to homestead.
For the record, my heart rate just went up about 25 beats per minute. My journey to homesteading is intricately intertwined with my mental health journey. So to talk about one is to talk about the other. And every time I tell this story publicly, I get a little bit more detailed and I get a little bit more honest about it. So this is your forewarning that it might be a little bit heavy, and I've never been this vulnerable about it all, so bear with me.
And we both might cry. Here's your warning.
About 4 years ago, I woke up one day and realized I was completely miserable. I was in an emotionally abusive marriage. I was making myself sick, working my butt off at a job being paid far less than I was worth, with a title far lower than what I had earned. I was living in a crowded city that was constantly grating on my nerves with traffic and crowds and noise, and now that I look back on it, I see that I was completely dissociated. Being dissociated was the only way that I could handle it all. From the time that I woke up to the time that I went to bed, I was constantly attuning to someone else's needs and taking care of someone else, never taking care of me. And life had to push me into some pretty uncomfortable circumstances to snap me out of that dissociation. It was early 2020, start of the pandemic, and up until that point, I was a relentless perfectionist and overachiever. Hypervigilance was my identity. It was what people appreciated from me. But it also meant that my nervous system was constantly in overdrive. My brain was in a literal survival mode, which meant I was never resting. And through a combination of various physical and emotional circumstances, I hit a wall where I just couldn't keep it all together anymore. I couldn't give 110% of myself to everything, to everyone, all the time, while maintaining a carefully curated facade of composure. And that undermined not only my self-identity, but also basically my roadmap for how to navigate the world and life in general. In that breakdown, I realized that I was living the life that I was told I should want instead of what I actually did want. But the even more brutal realization was that when I tried to ask myself what I did want, I was so disconnected from myself that I didn't know the answer. And that kicked off a season of intense introspection and self-advocacy, which was uncomfortable to say the least. To truly look at yourself, to confront your deepest sources of guilt and shame, to take real accountability for how you show up in life, regardless of what you've been through, to repair the relationship with yourself after decades of self-abandonment as self-preservation. That is hard. That is arguably the most difficult thing I've ever done. And to anyone who's never been in that place, the only thing that I can compare it to is coming to the edge of a cliff with a wildfire behind you. You can't go back because you're going to get burned. But going forward means jumping off of this cliff. And all you can do is hope that it doesn't break every bone in your body when you land. There is no safe or comfortable choice. It is all terrifying. It is all intimidating. And it's truly all you can do to keep moving through it. And as I did and continue to do the very uncomfortable but very necessary work on myself, I started to rediscover myself in the aspects of life that I do genuinely enjoy. I am a deeply intense, but also wildly simple person. There is not much in this world that makes me happier than good food, green leaves, sunshine, animals, and acts of service, most of which at that point were severely lacking in my life. And as a side effect of repairing my relationship with myself, that meant that my marriage fell apart. Not that it was ever really together, honestly. I've never delved into the details of my marriage for a few reasons. One, because I was still processing what happened. Two, because I don't want to give that person an excuse to re-enter my life or rehash conversations that have been had a million times. And three, every time I remember it or try to recount it, it does not feel like a memory. It feels more like reliving it. My heart rate, for context right now, is about double what it was before I started talking about this. It is a very real reaction. But it's important to talk about because hearing others openly discuss their experiences is the only way that I realized I wasn't alone in mine. And it's the only thing that made me realize that I wasn't stuck. So, I want to pay that forward, even though it's incredibly uncomfortable. I want to have the conversation because you never know who needs to hear it. So indulge me in this brief tangent, and please understand that this is only one side of the story, but it is my experience, and my experience is valid. He was someone that I had known for most of my life. He always felt like who I would marry, and it felt right at the time. We had very intentional conversations about what marriage meant to both of us and what we wanted our life to look like. We didn't enter it blindly. But pretty much right after we got married, he changed the rules. He quit his job, and I quickly found myself doing the lion's share of everything. My paycheck was paying for rent, food, utilities, all of the basics, which is something we never agreed to. I was the one taking care of the pets 99% of the time, but he made sure to do it 1% of the time, so that technically, we both took care of them. Same with the house. I would come home from a 9, sometimes 10-hour day at work to a messy house, unfed pets, and an unwalked dog, which I, of course, took care of because it needed to get done. And it was exhausting. But again, because he cooked his own food, he did his own laundry, he took the trash out once a week, he would insist that he was pulling his weight. And my attempts to express my discontentment were always met with the same formula of deflection. I can still go down that list. Every time it was, that didn't happen. If it did happen, it didn't happen that way. If it did happen that way, it wasn't that big of a deal. And if it was a big deal, it shouldn't have been that big of a deal. If it was and should have been a big deal, it was my fault that he did whatever he did, which was also exhausting. And honestly, it made me feel delusional. It made me feel like I was the problem, like I should just learn to be happy with the breadcrumbs that he offered. And having distance and perspective on that relationship now, I see things much clearer. With a person who refuses to take accountability, you can communicate until you're blue in the face. But they will always insist that your very valid reaction to their disrespect is the issue, not acknowledging their disrespect. There was never any accountability for hurtful actions or resolution to any ongoing issues. And even when the list of deflections was exhausted, the conversation only ever came down to the same inevitable statement. He would always say, "We'll figure it out." And that infuriated me. It infuriated me to go to the person who had promised to be my partner in life, to have my back, no matter what. For me to express how deeply affected I was by his unwillingness to meet the bare minimum of equal partnership, to plead for him to help me save the relationship, and to be placated with empty words, for him to do nothing. We'll figure it out. Sounds innocent enough. It even sounds like a comforting good faith statement without context. That after several years of reflection, I have come to the conclusion that what he really meant was, eventually you'll get used to it, and one day you'll stop complaining. He considered my misery an acceptable level of permanent unhappiness. It felt like he would measure my love for him and dedication to the relationship by how upset he could make me, by how far he could push me, while counting on my guilt and my shame to keep me in the relationship because it would be too shameful to walk away from a marriage. And if other life circumstances hadn't catalyzed my inner work, he probably would have been right. Marriage was not something that I entered or exited lightly, but after an excruciating year of quote-unquote marriage, we officially went our separate ways. And the divorce really opened my world. I went from having the next 40 years of my life planned out to starting from scratch. That's where homesteading came in. I had solidified where I found my joy in life, and all of them happened to intersect at homesteading. So after that experience, I was determined to build a life around the things that genuinely, truly make me happy. I was determined to do what was good for me, not just what was expected of me, because I had already wasted so much time and energy on people and relationships that didn't pour into me in the ways that I poured into them. And it did take me a couple more years and a lot more upheaval, like my mom getting sick, to translate homesteading from a mental desire to a physical reality. But here I am. I'm 2 seasons into homesteading on a property I never thought I could afford, securing my relationship with myself, and I am so immensely grateful to be where I am now.
Yay, good job. That was a lot.
That was a lot.
Do you
I've
feel
never
really
said that out loud so publicly. Okay.
Did it feel good?
It
Does
still
it feel
feels
good
scary.
now?
It still feels scary. Like there's still in the back of my mind, I'm like, great, now this person's gonna text me like very upset, or like I'm gonna get a whole lot of questions from friends wanting me to explain things that I maybe don't want to explain, but it does feel good to be able to own it in a way that I've never given myself the opportunity to do so before.
Well, I mean, also, if people are asking you about it, you can say whatever you want about it or not.
Yeah.
Just, if you don't want to talk about it further with people, don't.
Yeah.
I guess I just want to say there are a lot of parts of that do resonate with me as well. And I think even though that was probably really scary to share and not easy to share, that what you said about paying it forward and telling the truth of things, I think it'll help someone else.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the goal.
So let's move on to something a little lighter. What is your favorite thing about the homesteading lifestyle?
I get to do absolutely whatever I want. I get to make all my own rules. I can't think of another outlet where I can really let my creativity run absolutely wild like I can with homesteading, and it is fundamentally freeing in a way that I am not sure I can put into words, and not sure anything else could ever come close to.
I think it's like the best outlet for creativity because it's infinitely like changeable and fun, and you can just choose whatever you want. And I think that's a really good answer for a follow-up from that last story. What has been your biggest challenge so far homesteading?
Time limitations, for sure. Time is by far my most limiting factor. There's never enough time in the day or in the season to get done everything that I would like to.
That's also my biggest limitation. It's not easy. I feel like even if you didn't have a full-time job, it would still be a struggle to compete with time. What does your perfect homestead look like, and do you see yourself moving on from your current property at some point?
That's a tricky one because the vision of my perfect homestead will likely evolve with me. I'm a dynamic person, and that is a dynamic concept. Right now, my ideal homestead is sheep for milk, chickens for eggs and meat, productive fruit trees sprinkled around the pasture, a berry patch, a huge food garden, a flower garden, a greenhouse, and a root cellar. The last two I don't have. The others I have in some degree of realization.
So you're well on your way there.
Yeah. And as far as how long I'm going to be here, I'm not necessarily counting on staying on my current property forever, nor am I counting on needing to move. But for the amount of work that I've put into this, I would like to be here for the next few years at the absolute minimum, just to reap the benefits of the effort that I've put in. I think I could happily live here and get what I need from the land that I have, but sometimes I do think about what I could do with more land. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely rotate more animals or rotate your animals in longer periods, like you talked about earlier, if you had more. But like we also said, I feel like what you have seems manageable for you, just doing it by yourself.
Yeah, especially as one person.
And I can also say that buying a house or buying a place and getting a garden set up and then having to move on before you get to like harvest anything from it absolutely sucks. That was our experience with our last house. Yeah, that was awful. It was really sad. So I definitely understand the wanting to be there to like reap the benefits of all that hard work you've put in. Have you ever thought about quitting or regretted your decision to homestead?
I've never thought about quitting homesteading, but I have thought about quitting social media. I am an inordinately introverted person, and I'm really not comfortable being perceived, even through a camera lens. So I have to work up the energy to be on camera. It's not something that happens naturally for me, and honestly, most of the time, I would rather not be doing it. But I started this and continue to do this to share with other people. I do it because this is the stuff that I wish I had access to when I was starting and even before that, and because I am challenging myself to live my life out loud after spending so long being afraid to take space.
I've never heard somebody else say that they don't like being perceived, and I feel that very, very much. Like, that is exactly how I feel. And it's funny because we both have YouTube channels. We're like, I think it's because in that sense, I can control how I'm being perceived, at least to an extent, right? Like, you can edit out silly things that you say, but yeah, the whole being perceived thing is difficult for me too. And it's like, it's funny to me that last week we talked for 2.5 hours and then we were both like, okay, I love talking to you, but I need to be,
this is too much.
Yeah, I need to be in my shell now for the rest of the evening, potentially for the whole day tomorrow.
Yeah, I think we have very similar neurodivergencies, which play very heavily into that, so it makes sense.
That's why we are a good team. We can both be like, okay, I need a break.
I'm out.
My face hurts from talking and laughing, and also my anxiety is high.
Yes.
How do you balance the homestead obligations with all of your other life obligations?
Very good question. So, for me, I don't have kids. I don't even have a partner, and I have a very small circle of friends that I don't see regularly. I am incredibly protective of my time and my energy, and I am unapologetically so. I'm not saying that you can't homestead and balance this stuff with life if you do have more social obligations. I'm just saying that my time is more my own than most other people, and that heavily plays into it. But also, homesteading obligations are fun for me, although sometimes they do feel like items on a to-do list. More often than not, it feels more like playing than it does chores. So homesteading tasks are usually get-to-dos instead of have-to-dos. It doesn't really feel like another job, although it really is. I'm also someone who gets bored very easily, so the idea of being busy isn't daunting to me. I do still get overwhelmed. I do still make time to rest, but just generally I function better when I have a lot to do. All that being said, I think that balance is a gracious word for what I strike between life and homesteading. My sink is usually full of dishes. I'm probably wearing a shirt that I grabbed from the top of an unfolded pile of clean laundry, and I rarely find the time to eat 3 real meals in a day. It's not a tidy life, but it is a well-lived one.
I don't know about you, but honestly, making plans to go out and do things with people it feels like more of a job to me than doing homestead things.
Yes, because once you've told someone, okay, I'm going to meet you here at this time to do this thing, you don't have the flexibility to change it depending on your executive functioning or mood or like tolerability to be social in that moment. Like, if you made that commitment, you made that commitment. And then you're sitting there stressing about it, like, am I going to be prepared? Am I going to have the social battery to do this? I don't know. There's just so much extra energy that goes into all those calculations that, if it's just mulching the garden bed, you can do that whenever. You can do that however you want, whenever you want.
Yeah. If you've made a commitment with somebody else, it's no longer your time. It's someone else's time along with your time. And that stresses me out. So the homestead projects are a fun to-do list that I can check off. But
yeah,
not that I don't enjoy doing things with people, but it definitely feels more of a have to do this or a job than fun homestead projects.
It comes with a baseline level of anxiety, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm definitely the kind of person who's like, okay, we're going out to eat somewhere. I need to look up the menu and decide what I'm having ahead of time so that I don't stumble over my words when they ask me what I want.
And the pressure of sitting there looking at a menu when there's a server and you're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I know I'm taking up your time. I don't know what I want. Yeah. Nope.
Yep. Can't handle that. What differences or unique challenges have you encountered homesteading by yourself?
The financial commitment is a big one. My income pays 100% of everything. I don't have the luxury of splitting the mortgage or utilities with another person. And there are also times that I've gotten myself into a bind trying to do a time-sensitive 2-person task as one person. Like, for example, moving and dropping a beehive. That's something that happened to me because I was the only one here and I was the only one who could try to get it done. And also, a weird one to me is that most people don't really believe me when I say that I homestead by myself, which is odd. I get a lot of like, okay, yeah, you live alone, but like you have someone that helps you with the homesteading. And I'm like, no, it's me. So I never really know what to do with that when I get that one.
Do people like assume that you have like a friend or a partner that lives with you and they go, earn money while you homestead or something?
I think it's less that they think someone else earns the money for it and more that they're like, okay, 5'4" blonde woman, very kind and bubbly, like, you move a chicken coop uphill? Like, what? I think that's more of it, but I'm definitely projecting on that one a little bit.
I think we're going to need to hear a beehive story at some point then, because I want to know about this.
Do you want me to go into that now?
It's up to you if you want to.
Okay, the beehive story. So, what was that? Last winter, I was perusing the farm and garden section of Craigslist, as one does, just looking for things that I don't need, but you never know what's up there. And I came across a top bar hive. And for me in beekeeping, I'm not interested in doing the typical hives that you see. They're called Langstroth hives, and it's basically boxes stacked on top of each other. There's a lot of reasons. That's not what this podcast is for. I'll get into more of the details of why I like the hive systems that I do later. But found a top bar hive for sale, cheaper than I could build it myself. And I was like, sweet, I'm going to scoop this up. Side note, it is kind of risky to buy existing hives from other people and make sure you're not buying a hive with foul brood. I took a risk by doing it. Do what I say, not what I do. But I met up with a guy. He was like, "Yeah, I'm selling all my hives. Just getting rid of, everything." So I was like, "Okay, cool." He told me that the hive that had been in there was a late season swarm and that they just didn't have the resources to make it over winter, which made sense. And I was buying this hive in like February, March. So, opened the hive a little bit, looked at what was in there. I was like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, here's your money. We'll get it in the back of my car." And then after I got home, I was taking the hive apart because you don't want to leave your frames outside. They'll get infested with things like wax moths and all kinds of stuff. So I was taking the frames out so that I could put them inside, just to make sure they didn't get infested with stuff. Took a frame out and was like, "There's bees in here. There are bees in here. That hive did not die. It still exists. I guess he just hadn't seen it flying around for a while because it was cold, and he just assumed for one reason or another that they were gone." So it's like, okay, well, that means that I currently have a beehive in my freaking car, so I need to move this. And I had called my neighbor, and she was like, "Oh no, sorry, we're in town, we're not home." And I was like, okay, well, it's not a great idea, but I can probably move this. And so I picked up this whole long hive thing. I don't know what the dimensions of it were. Maybe like 4 feet long, 3.5 feet long. Not light and not unwieldy to carry. But I figured it out and I carried it over to this setup with a couple what are those called? Cinder blocks. And I got it set down and I was like, okay, cool. I just want to make sure it's super sturdy. I just want to make sure it's super stable. It's not going to knock over. And as I was adjusting it to make sure it was not going to fall over, that was what did me in, and it fell over. And of course, the bees all flew out. They were like, "Attack the thing that messed with our hive." So I ran away and then quickly realized that my phone was also fell out of my pocket right in the spot that I fell over on top of. So that was also another fun layer of realization with this. But eventually I had someone help me. They helped me get it off of my phone so that I could get my phone out from underneath there. And then I had just serendipitously made a friend who also happened to dabble in beekeeping like a few days earlier. So I got with her and I was like, "Hey, I know we just met, but can you help me?" Because it's not as simple as like just pushing it over. It landed on the top. So if you just like picked it up, it would expose the entire hive, which is not only horrible for the bees, but also definitely going to get you stung. So it was an ordeal to get that fixed, but yeah. Don't do 2-person tasks as one person.
It's a really great way to initiate a friendship. Like, hey, let's do this really fun thing together right away.
Very true.
Oh, that's a good story. Those are not small hives. I've seen them before, and they are large.
Yes.
Especially for one person. I feel like you got so close. You almost did it by yourself.
This close. So close.
Is there anything you would change about your homestead if you could?
I think I'd make it flatter. I love the views that I have given my elevation, but always lugging things uphill, and especially moving the chicken coop, which is not light uphill, is really difficult. And it's literally an uphill battle. You liked that one. That one got you.
I'm really a big fan of dad jokes and bad jokes and puns. Yeah, I feel like your property definitely wore me out. Our property is a hill, but not that much of a hill. It's a lot more like stretched out of a hill.
Yeah, I feel like that doesn't come across in my videos sometimes, like how steep it is. It really, like, I live on the side of a mountain, for real.
Yeah. No, I think before I came there for the first time, I like rewatched one of like your first video there where you like showed everything because I was like, I want to see if it's the same in person as it feels on video. And it was so much steeper than I remember it being in the video. And like the horse poop mountain.
Yes.
That is a lot higher up than I realized. That was the biggest shock to me. I was like, man, you really get up here. You were not kidding when you said you have to like haul it way the hell up here.
It's not easy. Yeah.
No. Yeah. You get some good exercise.
Cardio for sure. That's the only way that I get cardio, because cardio is my least favorite.
If you could give one piece of advice to a new homesteader, what would it be?
I think I'd say start with whatever you're drawn to most. If you want to skip chickens and go straight to goats, do it. If you want to get, have a huge garden, but you don't really want animals, do it. There's no one right way to homestead.
And that's I feel like that's a really good answer for people who don't have land too, because if you like cooking, if you like veggie, like gardening, you can do that in a place that you don't have land for animals or things like that. So it's a good answer. Okay. The last question is, where can we find you and what are the ways we can support you?
So I have my personal YouTube channel, which is Teranova Acres, and also an Instagram with very similar content, also Teranova Acres. You can listen to this podcast. You can buy me a coffee, and the link to that buy me a coffee is in all of my YouTube videos. It doesn't actually buy me a literal cup of coffee. It's like $5. And then anything that I get through the Buy Me a Coffee website goes back into the homestead. And then the last way is I do have a small business. It is a candle business for clean candles. They're all non-carcinogenic. I spent a really, really long time curating the materials for it to make it as clean as I could with the most responsible materials that I could. There's a whole list of it. But if you want to check that out, that is called Fleur Noir Candle Co. And we can throw a link down to that in the description below.
Yeah, we'll definitely have links to all of that stuff below. Sage also has a video on candle making too that I thought was a really good video. I've watched that one a few times now because I'm like, I'm doing this at some point.
No gatekeeping here.
She's given me a couple candles too, and they've smelled amazing, and they don't give me a headache. So, highly recommend that.
That is such a huge thing. Whenever I burn a store-bought candle now, it either gives me a headache, which is probably phthalates, or it makes my sinuses really stuffy, which is not something that I noticed before I started making my own.
It does both for me. We got a candle on clearance like after Christmas because Taylor thought it smelled good, and it's ridiculously strong. Like I have it in the kitchen and I can't burn it because the whole house just saturates with it for like days after I burn it, and it gives me the worst headache and it stuffs my nose up.
Oh gosh.
So I might just throw it away.
And next week, we are going to be delving into the costs of homesteading. We're going to try to be incredibly transparent with you all and give you a few different tiered options for different budgets and different setups. So if you are interested in that, definitely make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss out.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of She Said Homestead. We hope you enjoyed our chat. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. Send your homesteading stories to us at shesaidhomestead@gmail.com. We can't wait to share them on the air. To stay connected, follow us on Instagram for updates and sneak peeks at what's coming up next.
If you like video podcasts, make sure you subscribe to the She Said Homestead YouTube channel too. We can't thank you enough for being part of the She Said Homestead community. Until next time, happy homesteading.